Welcome to the Education Innovators Podcast. I'm Eric Byron. This is season 4, and it is my privilege to host this show where I get to talk with thought leaders and experts from all over the world. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started.
Ideas and literature and people who are actually achieving things and that there is a future, a good future that's possible for them. So those are all incorporated in our program. This is one of the reasons why, they're enthusiastic about what they're doing and they're still looking to the future. And that's knowing somebody like that is very inspirational.
That's Marsha Enright. She's talking about giving students access to mentors who inspire students to put down their phones and get real world experiences. We had a fascinating conversation about her innovative approach to applying Montessori principles to higher education and an emphasis on liberal arts based in the great books. It's really a very interesting approach. Keep listening. Today I have with me Marsha Enright, and she's an education entrepreneur, writer, and speaker with a rare blend of scientific training, liberal arts expertise, and institution building experience. Her broad scholarly interests range from neuropsychology and philosophy to literature and politics. She's the founder and president of the Reason Individualism Freedom Institute, or RIFI. That's the organization behind the Great Connections seminars. These week-long seminars use a great books-based methodology to immerse young adults in the full range of influential ideas, drawing on the best of classical liberalism, the Montessori method, and Ayn Rand's philosophy. So, welcome to the show, Marsha. This is going to be fun.
Great to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, it's great to have you here, and so you can share your story and the work you're doing to launch Reliance College. So this is a new liberal arts institution, and you're attempting to do something, I gather, that's a little different with Reliance. So let's start right there. What's going to be unique about that school when you get it launched?
A couple of things. One is I'm bringing the Montessori philosophy of education up to the young adult level. So why do I say that? The Montessori philosophy of education is based on what do learners need at different levels of their growth, of their development. And the idea of how to apply that knowledge to the young adult level hasn't been used yet in a college setting. So that's number one. I'm using Montessori principles. Number two, I'm making sure that the students have a lot of education in great books learning. Now, what do I mean by that? Great books are a collection of books, often called the classics, that are considered to be the greatest writers and thinkers that have lived in the world and the most influential. And the reason why they're important is because they have shaped the world around us. And so if you're really going to understand what's happening in the world around us, it's important to know what these writers have said and done and their relationships to each other. And thirdly, the program heavily is aimed at developing the students' independent thinking, their ability to judge anything themselves. And we do that by certain kinds of special methodologies that we use in the classroom. And we also want to make sure that they are educated in ideas across the spectrum of ideas so that they understand all sides of a particular arguments in the different areas of life, and they have the thinking skills to be able to decide for themselves what they agree with and what they don't, and take that into their life. And then lastly, we have a program which makes sure that whatever ideas they're learning in the classroom, they connect with their life and what happens in the world, so that they have both the intellectual foundation and the practical experience of what to do when in trying to become entrepreneurs of their own lives. So we have part of our program is this rigorous, specially designed liberal arts program driven by questions like, where did the world come from? Where did human beings come from? How do I know it? How should I live with other people? Questions like that. All the readings and the classes are organized by that. But then also every year, the students will be doing a project in an area of their professional interest. where they will be working to identify a problem in that area and then work on a solution to that problem and implement it if possible. So in this way, they will get practical experience in the area that they want to work in. They'll get connections with accomplished mentors, and they'll know a lot about what that area of work is. Because a lot of students go to college and they major in something and they get out and then they go to work in it and they really don't like it and they end up not knowing what to do with themselves afterwards. So this way, our students will have experience and they can try 4 different careers if they want. And then they'll have experience and they'll have connections and they'll have a portfolio of work so that when they go to get employed, they have something really substantial to show the employers.
Yeah. Sorry, a whole bunch of things pop in my head here, and I think about this.
Sure.
Well, the first one, let's just start there, is time, right? So normally college is structured in terms of I have semesters and I have certain credit hours I have to get to my graduation, my diploma. But Montessori is pretty unstructured, right? It's self-paced and I progress when I progress. So how do you control that in a college thing? And I know of people who have spent 7 years trying to get a 4 year degree anyway in traditional schools where it is more structured. Don't you worry that some of these students could just kind of enroll and never get anywhere? They keep changing their mind, they have another interest, and they just become lifelong students in a system like that?
First of all, I think you have somewhat of a misconception about Montessori education because the principle in Montessori education is freedom in a structured environment. So they have choice to do certain things, but within certain limits. And the teacher's job in that is to be a guide for the students and to make sure that they're on track to learning the things that they need to learn to be able to function well when they get to high school, when they get to college. So it's not as freeform as say Summerhill or one of these totally unstructured. It actually, I think people have a lot of misconception about Montessori. It actually has a lot more structure than a traditional school. It's just much more abstract in structure. It's not everybody sitting and doing the same thing at the same time, which is easy to see. It's
Yeah.
instead that the teacher's job is to closely observe the children and figure out what does that child need to learn next and then present them in a small lesson with the materials that they might need to do that. And then the child works on that material. It's true, they have a lot more choice in their classroom. They have a choice of what they can do first, what they can do next, how long they're going to work on something, all kinds of things like that. But there's still a progression in the curriculum, and the teacher keeps close watch of that. So this is similar to what we'd be doing in the college program. We actually have a fairly structured, abstractly structured curriculum that everybody will be taking. And then the individual variation will be more in terms of their, there's a, one of the things they'll be doing is a specialized tutorial where they pick out something that they want to discuss and they have a one-on-one or a very small group of with the teachers, an Oxford Cambridge
Mm.
tutorial, and the kind of papers or projects that they would be doing in relationship to that. And then, of course, their practical project. So these are some of the ways that we'd be working with them and helping them make sure that they learn the material that they need to learn to be successful in life.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that you're more structured around the what you need to learn and less structured around the how or when you learn it? Is that fair?
I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but
You
this
said you have a
is, oh,
curriculum, right? So you have a curriculum means you have learning objectives and you want them to
yeah.
learn certain things. That's to me, that's the what. But like Montessori, right? You set up the what in a framework, if you will, an environment that provides the students with those things they should learn, but then they have to go choose them, do them, and progress through them. And the teacher facilitates that learning, but she doesn't structure, oh, right now you're going to learn this, and then in an hour you're going to learn this.
The college curriculum is a little different, and it has to do with the level of development that the learner is at. A young adult is looking for their place in life. They're looking to learn how do they need to interact with other people to be successful, and they need to learn what their biggest goals are. So the classrooms are set up using this specialized discussion format in which all of the learning is driven by the questions from the students. So it's a specialized form of what's called a Socratic seminar,
Hmm.
where we read a text in common, or we might look at an artwork, or we might study some scientific experiment, and then we come together with questions about what did the author mean here, and what is the implication of that there. And the teacher is the guide in this kind of investigation. So the student comes with his or her questions about the text that we're all reading in common, and then starts the discussion with each other. And part of what they learn is what what evidence do they need for their opinion or their conclusion, and what reasons, how can they reason about it? And then they respond to what other people say about the same thing. Because the interesting thing is people can come at the same thing many different ways. And on top of that, in this specialized format, they have to really listen to what the other person says. We call this active listening, and respond to that other person before they go on and say their opinion about something. Because a lot of times in discussions, people will be talking, and then the silent people will be sitting there thinking about what they're going to say next. But we guide the students so that they actually actively listen to the other people. Now, this is a fabulous skill for life, both in work because most people work in teams or working with other people all the time. And understanding what the other people are saying and what they understand is really important in order to achieve the goals of the team. One of the biggest problems people have and the conflicts they get into is that they use the same words, but they mean something different.
Hmm.
And the active listening and the questioning of each other helps us suss out what the other person means so that we can come to a common understanding. And then we can make sure to use that to achieve our goals. And this is also great in personal relationships because personal relationships have conflicts of this type also.
Yeah. So I've had another guest on the show who is a proponent of debate-centered learning. And it sounds the concepts are so aligned there. So I wonder if you've actually considered using kind of formal debate structure to facilitate some of that. And the other point I want to make there that he made and get your reaction to this is he also describes it as a great kind of counter to the impact of AI because debate forces you right? In the moment of the debate, you don't have AI to help you form your answers or your counterpoint. As you said, you have to listen and then be able to articulate a response to what they have said. And so AI can help you prepare for a debate, but it can't help you during the debate. I'm just curious if you've thought about using formal debate in your structure.
No, I haven't, but it can be very useful. The process that we use, which I've been using in the summer program for 16 years, is not exactly a debate because in a debate, you're purposely taking opposing positions and then giving your arguments for them. Now, we're not doing that in the Socratic seminar. People do voice varying opinions, and then they have to give their reason and their evidence for it. But what we're trying to do is come to a common understanding about what the author is saying. We
Hmm.
want to make sure the principle is first understand what the author is saying, and then criticize or find the implications or see is there a different way to look at it. So it's a
Yeah.
slightly different thing, and debates can be very useful in that respect. I've just found this other way to be extremely powerful. And when I've had the students so I put everything I knew into these week-long summer programs that we started in 2009 called the Great Connections. And I was surprised at the outcome because it was even better than I thought it would be. Because the students coming out of it, about 75% of them have told me year after year, my life has been transformed by this
Hmm.
because now I understand anything myself. And not only that, they form very deep connections with each other. This is one of the reasons why I prefer this method rather than debate, because they end up becoming trusted partners in the learning. And it's interesting, one of the alumni who's an engineer now, and he came in 2009 and when he was about 17 and then a couple other times, he said, you learn how the other person's mind works in the discussion. And then afterwards, you get to know them personally. So you end up knowing them probably better than anybody else. And so this forms very powerful relationships with each other and trusted relationships, which are really at a premium these days. So this is all of the reasons why I really prefer this method to use in the classroom.
Yeah. Tell me about the persona of students you expect to attract. Obviously, this isn't no system works for everybody. What's your ideal student look like?
Sure. Before I get to that, I just want to mention that in our summer programs, we don't just sit around and talk about the text, about texts.
Okay.
We also do things like improv comedy games, and we learn about the city that we're in, and then we go out and look at it, and we try to connect what we're learning in the classroom with what's going on outside of the classroom, partly because people tend to take for granted their environment and they don't ask themselves, how did it get here? And so if you can raise your awareness, it makes you appreciate what's around us so much more and how much work went into it and how much thought went into it than you otherwise just unconsciously accept. And especially the young people these days, they have such amazing tools to use and no idea, most of them, how they work or where they're like a black box. And they take for granted how easy it is to meet people and meet up if you want to meet at a restaurant or you're going to a concert and you want to meet up. It's so easy to do that nowadays with the phones. And so this is part of raising people's awareness about the world around them so that they can be better prepared for life. And going back to your question, which I've of course forgotten now in the meantime.
I was asking
Sorry.
about no, it's okay. The persona of
Oh,
a
the
student.
persona. Yeah.
Yeah. And what
Well, we're
distinguishes that from a typical college student who's just going to choose to go do a bachelor's degree in engineering somewhere?
we're we obviously will need people who are mavericks, who aren't satisfied with what they find in other places and are looking for something that's going to be more individualized, more aimed specifically at helping them navigate life, and are willing to do the work that you need to do. So many students these days are completely checked out when it comes to going to school. They're just going through the motions in order to get that credential and then go on to whatever, to real life, whatever they're going to do.
Yep.
I've just so many high school teachers and professors who are telling me this. It's sickening. So our methodology surprises students because it really engages them by making it about their questions and what they want to understand. It gets them to be much more engaged. So the student has to be willing to try what we're doing and see does it suit them or not. It's not going to suit somebody who absolutely knows they're going to be a mechanical engineer and that's all they want to do, right?
Mm.
It's got to be somebody who's still curious to find out, well, and maybe not sure about what they need to do and willing to do the work.
Yeah. And graduates, what kind of jobs are they? So there's a couple of questions enrolled into this. Let me start with kind of accreditation. So you're going to come out with some kind of a degree. Tell me a little bit about that and then what that degree enables you to go do after graduation.
It'll be a Bachelor of Arts degree.
Okay.
And what will, first of all, knowing the classics very well and having examined really important questions about life, they're going to be able to tackle almost any problem that they come across. They will have the thinking skills to be able to solve problems that other people don't know how to solve. And that because one of the things that happens in these Socratic seminars is that you learn how other people come at the same problem and you expand your toolbox of thinking and your toolbox of reasoning. I say you become more like a Swiss Army knife of being able to think about things. So this will make a person very capable of all kinds of jobs. And especially in the future, we don't know what's going to happen with the market, right?
Mm.
What jobs are going to be available. But we do know that the thing that AIs can't do is they can't think creatively and they can't really reason through problems the way that human beings can. This is something that will make a person have a very advantageous position. And then the fact that they will have worked on in their area of professional interest will and have a portfolio of work to show possible employers will make them have an advantageous position.
Yeah, good. No, this is very interesting. I'm fascinated by all of this. Yeah, it ticks a bunch of boxes for me in terms of the stuff that makes me curious about what the future of education could be.
And I wanted to mention that our
Yeah.
program also will be teaching students things like economics and even into the role of personal finance and self-reflection skills because, or I like to say introspection skills, because
Okay.
people need to understand themselves if they're going to figure out what do they want to do with their life. So all of those things are wrapped into our program.
How do you do how do you do that? So it's almost therapy, right? When you start talking about self-reflection and we call it emotional intelligence. So how do you do that in a class? Is there a class for self-reflection?
Yeah, we'll have texts that we read and discuss that have to do with how to introspect what is the mind, what are great strategies for addressing certain personal problems that you have. And then the students will also offer them knowledge about certain tools they can use to investigate further for themselves. There's all kinds of tools like journaling and question self-reflective questions to try to understand what you're thinking and feeling or what your goals are there. So there's a lot of tools that they could learn about.
Okay. Fair enough.
Mhm.
There's no right or wrong answers on such things. Good. I'm glad you're taking that part seriously because we're seeing more and more of that. I'm actually having lots of discussions about wellness and programs that try to address the whole student, not just their academic achievement.
Mhm.
One of the things that comes up also, so would you agree that young people today are being overly influenced in their thinking and perspective by other young people? This social media frenzy and this, I'll call it a cesspool of negativity that just swirls around them, right? How do we deal with that? And what does your school do that hopefully breaks that cycle?
I do think that young people, unfortunately, are exposed to a lot of negative inputs, whether it's the world is going to die because of climate change, or we're going to have war, or there's toxic ma masculinity everywhere, or there's just so many ideas out there that are really negative, very, almost nihilistic. And I know that it's badly affecting young people because young people need a vision of the future that's inspiring. They need to know that they're going to have some future in which they can be productive, they can succeed in their goals, they can have good relationships. And to me, a lot of the counter to that is to show them ideas and literature and people who are actually achieving things and that there is a future, a good future that's possible for them. So those are all incorporated in what we're in our program. This is one of the reasons why I want to connect them up with accomplished mentors, because those are usually people who have navigated their life well, they're enthusiastic about what they're doing, and they're still looking to the future. And that's knowing somebody like that is very inspirational.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of forces in the world to deal with today. And you're right, there's so much negativity coming at folks these
I
days.
mean,
And we call it doom scrolling, right?
doom
You're on
scrolling, yeah,
social media
yeah,
just getting blasted by hate on whichever side of politics you're on, or
right.
say climate. Yes, everybody's got some doomsday scenario they're pitching, and it can be frightening. I can't imagine being young in today's world and trying
Right.
to filter through all of that. And yeah, I heard you make a comment about young people who don't want to have children because they are afraid to bring them into this world. And yeah, I know people who are saying such things, and I hope you are successful in brightening the lives of some folks.
I've even written about this. I have an article, What Vision Do Young People Need, in which I try to examine that and talk about the vision in that movie, The Joker versus Top Gun Maverick. They're just diametrically opposed in terms of the visions that they show. One, you brought up the social media problem, especially since COVID. One of the problems is that people are more used to just interacting with each other on their phones. And the kids that went to high school and college through COVID, I think it really impacted them badly because that's a period in which that's part of their development in which they're learning how to interact with people in person. And you know
Yeah.
how adolescents just want to talk to each other, right? I remember there's this book out, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, the sociologist, about this problem of phones everywhere. And the book has motivated a lot of schools to ban phones in the classroom. But interestingly, Lenore Skenazy, who is famous for her Free Range Kids blog, and then now she has an organization called Let Go, said that a subsequent study showed that if young people were asked, would they rather be in person unsupervised with each other or on their phone, they'd rather be in person. So one of the problems that's gone on, it seems to me, what that implies is that the parents have been helicoptering too many kids. They don't let them go and just play on their own. We have this whole problem of the kids not going outside and just finding the other kids and playing with them. Everything's supervised. And so what happens is that the phone then is a less supervised interaction, right? That's part of the problem.
Yeah, there's many facets to the problem, but I have found even with my own kids, they've gotten so used to text-based communication that when you suggest that they just pick up the phone and call somebody, whether it's
Yeah.
customer service or their doctor's office or whatever, it creates quite anxiety for them. It's like they
Yeah.
don't want to talk to a stranger on the phone. They would much rather text or, yeah, just avoid.
But think of that. They didn't have any opportunity through high school and college to practice that
Not
because
as much
if
as
they
they should have
didn't,
had, yes. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. We're not going to be doomsday ourselves here, though, because part of what I'm seeing on this show is that hope and optimism. There's a lot of really good things going on in education, and people like yourself who are trying to provide other means, other forms of education, other pedagogies that can help deflect some of this. So, I heard you use a phrase called enlightenment education. So, can you describe that? And I think you've touched on it with the great books, but enlightenment. What is enlightenment?
Okay, so first I want to talk about the phrase liberal arts education.
Okay.
Okay, that because that's related. Liberal arts was the education of a free person. If you look at the word liberal, it comes from the same root as liberty. And it meant what did a free person need to learn in order to live their life well? And that was a collection of these great authors. Now, the Enlightenment was the period between about 1700 and through the middle of the 19th century in which the idea of science, of reason, of progress, of human beings being able to conquer nature, understand each other, figure out ways to get along with each other instead of fighting all the time. That's when all that developed. The founders of the United States were deeply steeped in Enlightenment ideas, and they all had excellent liberal arts educations, whether it was in a college or, for example, Benjamin Franklin was self-educated, but he had very systematically read through the great books himself and been in discussions. So the Enlightenment was the idea that human beings were now enlightened about how the world works, how do we interact with each other, what's the best way to form societies, how should we live to live well, all of these things. So that's where it comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. liberal has a new meaning lately that
Yeah.
yes. So when you talk about liberal arts, I think yes, there's a whole group of people who would apply a different meaning to that. So thank you for
Well,
clarifying.
right. And not only that, but at many colleges that are liberal arts colleges, they are not really giving the students the liberal arts education that formerly people got
Yeah.
if they had during the Enlightenment or later.
All right, let's take a quick commercial break for my usual plug here for the human intelligence movement. Not a paid advertisement, I'm just a fan. The mission of the human intelligence movement is to ensure that all students have the skills to thrive and succeed in an AI world. Um, I've got a link in the show notes there. You should check this out. They're really doing some great work, and I hope you'll support them. All right, now back to my conversation with Marsha Enright. She's an educator, an entrepreneur, and we're going to dig deeper into the secret sauce behind Reliance College and her efforts to develop critical thinking skills and improve self-awareness in high school and college students. Agree with that. By the way, you're in Chicago, is that right? Yeah, so yeah, my brother lives in Chicago. Beautiful city. You were talking about getting out in the city. So what kinds of experiences you get? And I do love this. This is one of my passions too, is get out of the classroom and go learn in the real world. Give me an idea of some of the experiences you would want the students to have out in the city of Chicago.
There are several. For example, I might tell the students a very short story about Chicago and why it's shaped the way it is because of the fire, why we're an architecture center, because there was a great fire there in 1871 that basically burned down the city. And that got the people in the city to be to draw in a lot of new architects, a lot of builders, and think really hard about how should the city be rebuilt so that in the late 1890s, the Commercial Club of Chicago, I think it was, and hired Daniel Burnham to make a plan of Chicago. And he was a genius architect. He had organized the 1893 World's Fair, which was an amazing World's Fair in Chicago, drew 600 million people. Imagine that in
Wow.
that era, from all over the world, 600 million people and had beautiful gardens with it and pools of water and buildings and all kinds of things. So the City Club of Chicago hired him to make a plan of Chicago. How should Chicago be laid out? And he came up with this is why we have a grid system. We're one of the easier cities to get around because we're all laid out very logically. And we have a lot of beautiful elements to it, parks, lakefront, fountains, all kinds of things like that that he suggested that be implemented. So I give them a little story about we were very influenced by this fire and also by the idea of how to make things really work really well. Because an informal motto of Chicago is the city that works. Okay. And so, for example, the Chicago River goes into Lake Michigan. It's one of the reasons why Chicago is here because we're basically connected to Europe by the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Great Lakes. So people can ship things from Europe through the St. Lawrence Seaway, the Great Lakes, down Lake Michigan to the Chicago River, and then get all the way to New Orleans. Okay. Because of the Illinois River, the Mississippi. So I tell them things like that. And they had a problem with the sewage in the 1890s. So they literally lifted the city up 20 feet. And if you go into
Hmm.
downtown Chicago, you'll see that the river, the bridges and all the walkways are 20 feet above where the level of the river is, and that's why.
Hmm.
So I take them around, I tell them about the city, I teach them a little bit about architectural styles. Then we go walking around to observe them, and then we go on an architectural scavenger hunt where the students are broken up into teams. I give them a list of places they have to find, and the teams have to find them and then go there and take a picture.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of activity that we do. And then another thing is I always bring in these accomplished professionals, or we go to their places of work. And the idea is to show students you tend to only know what you grew up with. But there's so many amazing jobs in the world. It's a way to open their mind about all the possibilities. So we might go to somebody's factory. We went to a factory that a Polish immigrant had created of high tech gears and things like that he sells to Caterpillar. We went to a boatyard that a man from Chicago created from the scratch that's on the southwest side of the city. And it has hundreds of different kinds of boats and ships there. And he told us all about how he got started and what the different boats are like. Everything from this really high-tech French catamaran to a sailing ship from 1868. So he has
Hmm.
just this amazing array of, and we always take public transportation to get to these places so that they can get a sense of where are they exactly and how far from where we're staying and things like that.
Yeah.
So those are kind of,
Okay.
and then we'll go to an improv comedy to see professionals do it too.
Oh, nice. So, do you assume most of your students are not from Chicago and are not familiar with the city?
Yeah, most of them aren't. No, most of them are
Okay.
from all over the United States, and then I've gotten people from all over the world, as far as Nepal, the Philippines, South America,
Okay.
Africa, all kinds
Yeah.
of places.
Oh,
So
how
yeah,
important is that diversity in the student base? Because again, this can be part of the challenge in a local school where all the students are local. They tend to look and think and talk the same. But if you've got a really diverse group from regionally and across the world, how important is that in these interactions and discussions you have around the great works, the great books?
I think it's very enriching. It's very enriching to have people from all different places. And even I remember I had a girl who was from a small town near Rockford, Illinois, and I roomed her with a girl from Brazil. And this was the first person from another country that she'd ever met. So it was a very enriching experience for her. Yeah, so it can really add a lot to the education. I don't know if it's absolutely essential, but it's really valuable.
Okay. Who's the most interesting, or just tell me a story of a really interesting discussion that's come out of some of these, maybe that really surprised you, maybe even changed your own perspective on the meaning, right, intention of, an author. Anybody changed your mind on something?
I've often learned a lot about a reading that I didn't think of myself. I don't know if I can say anything right offhand, if I have an example or anything like that, but
Okay.
yeah, almost any discussion like this, because like I said, people come at things differently and they think of things or they pick out a part of the text that I didn't pay any attention to. I
Hmm.
just read over it. In fact, one of the things that's great about this kind of discussion is that you're really paying attention to what the author said. And people realize, because I also run an online class on the great books on Thursday nights, and that has mostly older adults in it. And what they find when they first start is they're shocked to find out what they haven't paid attention to when they read. They thought they read it. And then when we start discussing the details, they're like, wow, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
And it can really change your mind about what did the author mean.
Yes. Oh, we could get into a whole philosophical debate about
Yeah.
the importance of that and the choice of words in text. But one of the things I want to touch on is you have a list of the great books, and there's varying lists on what books are considered the great books, but I'm sure you've got
Mhm.
the classics in there. But you supplement that with some more modern
Mhm.
works of writing and literature as well. What are some of the ones that you add in there that you consider to be more modern, but also great books?
I'll add in some works by economist Ludwig von Mises or Friedrich Hayek, and I'll and John Rawls is a political theorist from Harvard that wrote in the 70s, and his book is really influential. I'll add in works by Ortega y Gasset, who wrote in Spain in the 20th century. Some I'll add in works by Ayn Rand that I think are very powerful. She has a book called Philosophy Who Needs It that has a great essay in it that introduces you to how important philosophy is to actually living. I'll add in scientific works that are more recent, whether it's something about genetics or something about mind or something new in biology. We'll add those kinds of things.
Yeah, let's go back to Ayn Rand and objectivism. Is that how you say it? So where does that kind of fit in? Because that actually was in your bio to emphasize her teachings. So how does that fit in with the kind of philosophy of the school and the education?
If I were to summarize her philosophy, it's the that reality is real, and our job as human beings is to know it and to use our reasoning minds to know it, and that the end of each person's individual life is their own flourishing, and that the best way to live with each other is in a free society in which we each respect the individual rights of others. So that that leads to a free society. It leads to capitalism. It leads to people being able to pursue their own interests, their goals, their creative ideals, and live with each other in a peaceful way. So these are my aims, and what I'm trying to help people do is become independent in their thinking so they can decide for themselves how do they want to live and who do they want to live with and in what format and all that kind of thing. So that's how it fits in.
Okay. Yeah, I honed in on one piece of that. The very first thing you said, reality was reality, right? Thing are real. So in today's world, this is becoming a real challenge, right? Between AI generated fake images and fake videos and audio of people talking that they didn't really say it. How much do you talk about that and the challenges in the current world in terms of understanding what is real and pretty much nowadays, right, the classic thing is anything you disagree with, you just say, oh, that's fake news. So how do we teach students that critical thinking to be able to understand that, yes, a lot of what you get hit with really is fake or misinformation, and how do you discern what's real and what isn't?
This is where sharpening your reasoning skills and really paying attention to what is the evidence for what somebody says is really important so that you can recognize when you're not being given the whole story. You're being given only bits of the evidence, or somebody claims something, but they don't let you know how do they know that. So this is where sharpening your ability to reason, to pay attention to what the evidence, what facts is this idea based on, what facts is that idea based on, how did you come to that conclusion? This is really important. And I totally agree with you. It's worse than ever today. And one of the things that I think is important is to practice looking at stuff that you get on the internet and having discussions about whether is there enough evidence for what this person said, or what's a little bit funny about the way that it's said, because that kind of thing happens in any kind of writing anyway, right? But
Hmm.
it's coming at you fast and furious with everybody commenting and taking sides and everything like that. And so having the skill, having the self-confidence that you can come to your own conclusions, and the practice and how to do it and knowing how to do that gives you self-confidence. This is one of the things I find with the summer program that I have is the students by come in, they're all anxious, they're not sure what they're supposed to be doing. They don't know each other. And then we have this methodology where they really get to know each other. They come to trust each other. And we're showing them how they can have something valuable to say
Hmm.
because we're teaching them how to use their minds, how to find the evidence for their opinions, how to evaluate things. By the end of the week, they're just amazingly happy and feel their self-confidence has increased and they're having a lot of fun with each other. All those things go into being able to be much more critical about what's coming in to you from social media or what your neighbor says down to the street or anything like that.
Yeah. No, you're right. It really comes down to requiring evidence. And we actually talk about this a lot on the show when it comes to ed tech and people pitching these ideas and saying, okay, what's the evidence that, you know, your system really works, that students
Mhm.
are learning what they should be learning. So I'll put that back on you. So you anecdotally commented that you've had many students say, oh, this changes my life. But is there more kind of concrete evidence that the system you want to implement for Reliance College is proven, that it has great learning outcomes and student outcomes?
Well, I'll tell you a couple different things. One is there's a book that was written in 2006 by a psychologist from the University of Virginia, a professor there, called Montessori, The Science Behind the Genius, in which she goes through all of the findings of modern science about what are the best learning environments, what are the characteristics of the best learning environments, and then how Montessori education fulfills that. Over the whole book is about that. So that's some of
Sorry,
the
can you
evidence.
give me a link to that book
Sure.
or a
I
reference?
can send it to you. Yeah.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
love to read that. Yeah.
She has a whole website. Yeah. Montessori, the science behind the genius.
Okay.
And secondly, with my own students, I keep in touch with many of them. And when I've interviewed them, they talk about how they use what they learned in our classes in their work today, or it's even shaped what they decided to go into. I've had situations like a 16-year-old boy come to it and go, when he went home, his mother said to me, he went there as a boy and he came back as a man. She was just
Wow.
amazed at the change in his behavior. I had a young girl who was so shy. She was 17 and she was going to community college at this point. She was so shy that she would email her mother rather than talk to her. And after our program, one week in our program, she went home. She talked to her mother for 2 hours. Then she went out and got her driver's license and she got herself a job tutoring adults. So it just changed her whole self-confidence.
Yeah.
I have many examples like that. So
That's good. That's good. How about sustainability of a change, right? Because it's one thing for somebody to come out all hyped. They've had this experience, whether it's a month later, 6 months later, a year later, the influences of the world have kind of washed that away. Is there any kind of ongoing program, say weekly events or whatever, that you encourage these students to continue to touch base so they're reminded of what they learned?
many of them do stay in contact with each other. Of course, what you said happens because it's people run into all kinds of problems in their life, but many of them stay in contact with me. Quite a few have come in subsequent years a couple of times. I've done 2 week study vacations to Europe, different places, Greece, Italy, France, and we almost always have some of our alumni on the trip with us.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and those things we usually have a theme like the ancient Roman Republic, and I have a set of readings that we do, and every day or every other day we'll have a seminar on one of the readings at the place where the person that we read lived or worked, and we go see the sites, and we have guides, and we go swimming, and all those things together.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm having one of the alumni start a alumni network for us.
that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I know we're nearing the end of our hour here. A couple of things to kind of wrap up. One is you were hoping to launch the school this fall. And as we talked right before we started recording, you mentioned that you've now postponed that a year. You're trying to raise the right funding. And I'm sure part of that is you got to do it right. Don't do it if you can't do it. So I get that. So what happens during this next year to prepare? You have more time now, right? You thought you were going to launch this year. Now you're going to launch next year. What happens in the next 12 months? And then, and I know, or at least what I had heard was you were going to try and launch with just like 50 students and then and grow from there. So tell me about the kind of phased approach and rollout for Reliance College.
Well, the next year, what we've been trying to do is really ramp up our outreach, our publicity, people getting to know us, whether it's possible funders or whether it's students or parents or grandparents. So we're really on a campaign to do that.
Okay.
And we have 3 new programs we're running this year. So I run a Thursday night discussion group on great books online, which is open to anybody who's interested. And I have this week-long program in the summer, but now we're doing a 3-day program in Houston for students during winter break, January 9th to the 11th.
Hmm.
And we're starting a new program we're just putting together called AI Proof You. And this is a hybrid program where we'll do a weekend together for students and young professionals weekend together, then several months in which they'll be working on a project and we'll be checking in with them and connecting by Zoom and things like that. And then a weekend at the end where we'll all get together again and wrap up what we're doing. And the aim of that will be to help them learn how to develop themselves in a way that no matter what happens in the future, they will be able to get work. They will develop their minds in a way to get work. And then the last thing is this, we're doing another overseas trip in the summer to Spain called Spain's Contributions to Freedom. And we'll be, again, going, for example, we're going to visit where Columbus took off from Spain.
Okay.
We're going to go to Cordoba, which was a center of intellectual development during the Moorish control of Spain. A very famous thinker named Averroes lived there, among many others. And we'll be going to where Cervantes set Don Quixote.
Yeah.
Many different places like that.
Yeah.
So it'll be a combination of study and history and sightseeing and vacationing.
All right. That sounds like a busy schedule. So, is there anything we haven't touched on that you were hoping we would talk about during this conversation?
I think we probably covered most of what I wanted. I wanted people to know about the project. I wanted people to know about that the summer program is still going and it's for students 16 to 24 years old. They can find out about it on our website, reliancecollege.org. And of course, if they're interested in what we're doing, please sign up for our newsletters. We do not dun you with a letter every day. It's usually once a month or something like that.
Okay.
And that's about it. And I don't know if I mentioned, I started a Montessori elementary school in 1990 and ran that for many years. So I've done this kind of thing before.
Yes, I did catch that from your background that
Yeah.
you ran a Montessori school. I've been fascinated with Montessori for a while. I've actually had another guest on the show who runs a Montessori school here in Hong Kong, but it's very young. I actually went and visited the school and sat in the corner and watched for a few hours to try and really grasp the philosophy there and the style. But that was 3 to 5 year olds, I think, was basically, which is more common, I guess, with
Yeah.
Montessori, that it's quite young and then they progress into more public school. Thank you so much for sharing. This has been really interesting. I love what you're doing, and I'm certainly rooting for you. I hope that you
Oh,
have
thanks
success
so
with
much.
with this program. Any links you want to send me that you want me to include in the show notes there? I think I've got one for reliancecollege.org, but anything else you want to share, and say in that book you mentioned on Montessori and the science there, that would be awesome.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to your audience about it. I really appreciate it. And I welcome any questions people have or any help that they might need.
Great, thank you. So there you have it. Montessori is not just for preschoolers. Martha follows the science, and she's using her many years of experience and education to extend beyond the limitations of traditional higher education. We know that in today's world, with the ever increasing capability and impact of AI, we have to look for new ways to reach students and develop independent thinkers. There's no one size fits all solution here, but I am encouraged by the work that Marsha's doing and other educators are doing in looking for new ways to teach and learn. That's innovation in education. I'm Eric Byron. Thanks for listening to the Education Innovators Podcast in Season 4. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that. We've got some great stories of innovation coming up. You don't want to miss them. To all those education innovators out there, keep doing what you're doing. You are making a difference.